All right, guys. So the last part of these notes is kind of a continuation of the formula that we've already looked at, we've worked with. It's talking about the part under the radical. That is called the discriminant. Big fancy word, right? So if you hear discriminant, it's referring to just the part under the radical, the b squared minus 4ac. The discriminant, could you do all of this without knowing the discriminant itself? Yes, you could. But we use this for a couple different important reasons. I want to make sure that you know why it's used and what it's used for. Helps us in the next section that we'll cover, and it will help us on your test, and I'll explain why. But the discriminant is the part under the radical, and three things could happen when you find that value of that number. It can be greater than 0, it can be positive, it can be equal to 0, or it can be less than 0 or negative, right? That's kind of your options for your numbers, a positive, a negative, or 0. So what it tells us, think about taking the square root of these different types of numbers, okay? If you take the square root of, let's say, 5, or let's do 25. Let's give you an actual number. What's the square root of 25? Just 5? Plus or minus 5. Right, when we take the square root of something, it's always plus or minus, right? So if I take the square root of this, I will have 2 real answers, okay? Because anytime I take the square root of a positive number, I get plus or minus, which gives me 2 answers. We haven't talked a lot about the graphs. We'll get more into it in Chapter 5. But when you find the answers, when you're solving all of these things for 0, if you would graph them, your answers are where it's crossing the x-axis. And that'll come into play a lot more so in Chapter 5. We'll start talking about that. So the 2 real answers, it crosses the axis twice. Those are your answers for x. That's you solving. If you get 0, what's the square root of 0? Would you tell me plus or minus 0? No, that sounds silly, right? So how many answers do I get? 1. Real hard, right? And that means this is going to come down, it's going to touch, and then it's going to go back up again. Okay? And again, Chapter 5, we really talk a lot about that. So we only get 1 answer. This we haven't talked about. It's actually the very next section, which we will look at starting tomorrow. But if you get a negative underneath your radical, grab your calculator real fast. Type in the square roots of negative 25. What do you mean you can't do it? The answer is 5i. But anyway, it's plus or minus 5. Plus or minus 5i. It's imaginary. Section 4.8 is all about imaginary numbers, which we will talk about starting tomorrow. Like, dang it, I don't know how the real ones work yet. Don't switch me. All right, so guys, if you get a negative underneath your radical, think about what that really means. If I take the square root of a negative number, your calculator is going to have a problem with that, right? Tomorrow we'll talk about how to deal with that, but know that that's too imaginary. They're not real. Okay, think about what the graph looks like. It doesn't cross the x-axis. That's why they're imaginary. Your calculator can't find them. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys questions. I'm going to ask you to find the discriminant, which is just the number under the radical. I'll ask you how many answers will you get? 0. Do I ever get 0 answers? Do I get 1 answer? Do I ever get 2 answers? Yeah. So you're either going to have 1 or 2 answers. And I'm going to ask you if they're real or if they're imaginary. Okay? So that's part of why we do discriminant. The other big thing for discriminant, which is huge, will help you on your test, is if discriminant is a perfect square, the original problem is factorable. When it comes time for your chapter test, it's going to be broken up section by section on your test. You'll have a section that says solve by factoring, which we've done over and over again, so don't forget it. I know we're kind of moving on, but don't forget how to factor. You'll have a section that says solve by taking the square root. You'll have solve by completing the square, solve by the square root method, and then the last part of your test, I'll have 6 problems on it, and I'll ask you to solve using any method you want, but you have to use each method at least once. So you're going to have to make sure that you factor at least one of them. And sometimes you can waste a lot of time telling whether or not it can be factored. So if you look at the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, if that's a perfect square, it will factor. Okay? Yeah. Hold that question for tomorrow. Okay? We'll talk more about it tomorrow. Today, let's just focus on discriminant. We'll focus on that tomorrow. Okay? Her mind is blown right now. She doesn't know where to go with that. Okay, so here we go. Find the discriminant. Give the number and type of solutions of the equation. So does it have one or two solutions? Will they be real or imaginary? If the solutions are real, then find the solution. Jared, you with me? So number one, we want to make sure they're set equal to 0 in standard form. We're good. So finding the discriminant. Remember, the discriminant is just this part right here. So what's my b value? Negative 8 squared minus 4 times a times c. My calculator is my best friend. And we get a discriminant of negative 4. That's my discriminant. Okay, that's the number that would be under the radical. So how many answers will you get? 1 or 2? I would get 2 imaginary. Yep. So, but it says if they're real, to find them. These are imaginary. Tomorrow I will show you how to find them. We haven't found those yet today. The other question I always want to ask you is, could I have factored that original problem then? Is negative 4 a perfect square? No. When you factor, could you ever get an imaginary number in factoring? No. Correct. All right, so this one, you might want to make a note, not factorable. Not factorable. Okay, so number 2. Do you notice how similar all of these problems are? Right, they're very similar. They're very similar. Yeah, 17, 16, 15. All right, so this one, b squared, negative 8 squared, minus 4 times a times c is what? Does discriminant equal 0? Okay, well, if my discriminant is 0, you'll have one real answer. One real solution. Now again, one and real, I'm going to be looking for how many and what type. That's what I'm asking for. Is that one factorable? Is 0 a perfect square? What's the square root of 0? So is it perfect? Yes. So this is factorable. Yay! Now it said if the solutions are real, I want you to find them. Let's go back to the quadratic formula. Negative b would be positive 8, plus or minus. Do I already know what goes here? 0. We already did it right here. Over 2 times a. Yeah, a. So we get 8 plus or minus nothing. It's 8 over 2, which is 4. Cool, right? Look back at, we said it was factorable, right? So if you factored this, what are your signs? Minus. We have x squared, so x and x. 4 and 4. So if I asked you to factor and solve, you would get x equals 4 and x equals 4. So how many answers did you really have? I really have one answer. 4 just showed up twice. Okay. 8 plus 0 is 8 divided by 2, 4. 8 minus 0, still 8 divided by 2, 4. Since it's that 0, it doesn't change anything. So, I mean, if you want, you could technically say we have 2 answers, but it's the same answer listed twice. right, what about number 3? Let's do your discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So negative 8 squared minus 4 is a times c. I get what? Positive 4. Discriminant equals 4. That technically usually means domain, if you see it, maybe. Or diameter is usually lowercase d. All right, good. 2 real. Is it factorable? Is 4 a perfect square? So this is factorable. Okay, so I'm supposed to actually find them. You said they were real, so I can actually find these. So negative b would be 8 plus or minus. It'd be radical 4. Right, we found the part under the radical. All over 2 times a, which is just 2. What's the square root of 4? So 8 plus or minus 2 over 2. I think he's thinking of simplifying these, right? Yeah, you can. So he's looking at 8, 2, and 2 can all be divided by 2. So 4 plus or minus 1 over 1, I don't really need. So x equals 5 and 3. If you factored that, it would be x minus 5 and x minus 3. So then x equals 5 and 3. How are we feeling so far? Tired. Well, we got something fun planned today, but we got to get through these last 3, and then I got something fun for you.
Oh, is this that one thing?
All right, last 3. No, he's a real dog. Isn't he cute? I love the dog pictures on here. It is. That's a real dog. Isn't he cute?
It just has glasses on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I don't know if they're real or not, or if they're just animated on there. I don't know. He's cute though, isn't he? All right. Anyway, number 4. b squared minus 4 times a times c. What do we get? 49. So if your discriminant is 49, how many answers? 2, real or imaginary? Real. 2 real. Is it factorable? Yes, because that's a perfect square. So I want you to find the answers now. Yes.
Why are all of the terms all negative? Is it
I don't know why I did them like that. No idea. Yeah. No, honestly, no one's ever said anything. I've never noticed. But yeah, they are all negative, aren't they? Sorry. All my b values and all of these are negative. She asked, does it work if they're positive? Yeah, it does. They just happen to be that way. All right, so if we're going to solve negative b, 3 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 2 times a. Yeah. What's the square root of 49? 7. So 3 plus or minus 7 over negative 4. Oh, what's 3 plus 7? 10 over negative 4 would be negative 5 over 2. And then 3 minus 7, negative 4 over negative 4 is what? And remember, we've talked before about if your answers are nice and pretty, what that means. It means you could have factored it from the beginning. No, it doesn't mean it's wrong.
Is it good? Yeah, it's pretty good. You do it again.
All right, 2 more to go, guys. Then we got something fun today. Why is what? Because I was using quadratic formula to find my answers. The discriminant is just the part under the radical. And then if I actually want to find the answers and I plug it back in, I actually still need to take the square root of it. The discriminant is just b squared minus 4ac, not the radical also. Yes?
Question. Did you use this instead of this quadratic formula? Did you use this to find out the family square
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it for that reason. All right, number 5. So b squared, negative 3 squared, minus 4 times a times c. So what do we get for the discriminant? Negative 47. So what's that mean for my answers, Jesse? Question. It is all based on that. If it's positive, you have 2 real. If it's 0, you get 1 real. If it's negative, you have 2 imaginary. Yeah, it's based on that chart right there. So what do you think, Jesse? If I have negative 47 for my discriminant, what kind of answers will I have? Will I get 1 or 2? Good. Yeah. 2 imaginary. Is it factorable? No, that's not a perfect square. Boys at the back table, do I need to separate you? Might be a good choice. And then I only asked you to find the real ones because I haven't taught you how to find imaginary yet. All right, last problem, number 6. What do we have to do first? Standard form, good. So x squared minus 6x minus 5 equals 0. B squared minus 4ac. So negative 6 squared minus 4 times a times c, 56. All right, so if I get 56 for a discriminant, how many answers and what type? 2 real. Is it factorable? Not factorable. 56 is not perfect. Can I find the answers, though? Yeah. Negative b, it's going to make that 6, plus or minus radical 56. I already did the work on that. Over 2a. What perfect squares are in, or how do you simplify 56?
It'd be 2 and 14. 2 radical 14.
You said 9. 9 doesn't go in there. So it's going to be 6 plus or minus, you said 2 radical 14, right? All over 2. Can I simplify those numbers? Yeah. Remember all 3. The 6, the 2, and the 2. 3 plus or minus radical 14. I don't need the over one. All right. That was a real quick version all the way through discriminant. Questions on all of that?